Call the meeting to order, please. Join me in the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening, everybody. You'd never know we had snow this morning. How quickly it comes, and how glad that it did leave us so quickly. We have a number of people in the audience tonight. We have Linda Braley representing our Federation of Teachers, Pat Fedor, our administrators. I think I saw Deanne Stewart, our first selectman, and maybe you can help me with recognizing us. We have the New London Day and the patch. They've been following me around for 6.5 weeks. Great. Well, good evening and welcome. The first item on our agenda this evening relates to student presentation. We have John Stockman from the high school. Let's have a presentation. Okay. John is here tonight with other students who are part of our United Nations group. And John is a senior at Waterford High School. He's a member of the National Honor Society and a high honor student. He's planning to attend either Brown or UConn. He has an important decision. He's a member of the high school soccer, swimming, and tennis teams. And along with the other students, he's been instrumental in our Model UN program. And Mr. Ian Cheney is the advisor. So welcome, John.
All right, so first off, I'd just like to thank for the time that we have to explain our club. I think it's a great club, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to explain it to the board. So first, I'll hand it off to Sam Suresh. He's the president of our club, and he's going to explain the general things behind the club.
I'd like to say thanks for having us. Really kind of you. And I'd like to start off by talking about how the club started. In my junior year, I'm a senior right now. In my junior year, halfway through the year, I realized that we didn't really have any clubs about international relations, and our history class and civics classes talk about our national government. And I mean, we don't really go that much into international relations as much as we should be doing. So I felt like it was really important to have our student body have a better understanding of what goes on in the world. So I went to Mr. Cheney, my sophomore year history teacher, and I asked him, what do you think about this idea of having a Model United Nations Club, which basically simulates what goes on in the UN, but with a group of students. So each student is assigned a country from around the world, and we basically take committees like the Security Council or human rights, and we kind of go over key issues in the world. And we basically simulate the session and make up our own resolutions and answers to many pressing problems. So basically, in my junior year, last year, the club didn't really get off to a great start. We only had 5 members come in every week, and it wasn't that good. But after I spent a semester in DC, and I had Model UN there, and I really saw the value and the potential of what it could do to the students and how much interest it could have in everyone. And so I came back and I decided that I really wanted to make it a success this year. And I found other people with the same ideas and the same goals. So I had John, who really stepped up this year and helped me out, including recruiting a lot of members. And that was really great because we got a lot of people this year. And initially we had 40 students interested, and now we have 25 committed students who show up to each in-school conference that we have. So it's been really great, and I really have to give it to our members because they've really shown the commitment this year. So we actually had goals last year to go to Yale and to go to DC and try to attend these conferences that they have at these colleges for high school students. But we really couldn't do it with 5 members. But this year we maintained the same goals, and with our about 20 members, we went to Yale, and it was really good. And the members will elaborate more about what we did there. So I'll give it to them.
Thank you.
All right, so we had 3 in-school conferences this year, just to warm ourselves up to the idea of having a conference. We discussed Darfur and natural resources and their Korean conflict, or a potential Korean conflict. And then the highlight of our year was definitely the conference at Yale. I'll just give you the details about it, and then I'll have the other students come up and describe what they got out of it. It was a 4-day conference at Yale University. There were about 1,300 students there. There were 15 committees or so that debated different topics. So there were, at tops, there was about 100 kids in the committee, and the smaller committees had maybe 20 kids in it, 20 to 30. And they were just like what the United Nations would do. And so now I'll hand it off to Sanjana.
Hi, I'm Sanjana Radande, a freshman. My experience at Yale Model United Nations was truly priceless. I had the opportunity to step into the shoes of ambassadors from UN member states to debate current issues on the organization's agenda. Yale Model UN was probably one of the most fun and inspirational experiences I've ever had. My committee focused on the issue of nuclear non-proliferation around the world. And while I've learned a great deal about proliferation, my favorite part about the committee was watching students stand up and take leadership positions by creating realistic resolutions and persuading their peers to agree with these solutions. I've developed many different kinds of talents by participating in Yale Model UN, including such skills as teamwork, writing expository and persuasive essays, debating, and negotiating that are important for my personal development and future success. So overall, it was an amazing social experience as well as an academic venture.
Hi, my name is Anthony Steady, and I'm a junior at Warren High School. So I'm just going to keep this short and sweet because the other students have really been able to talk about Model UN. What I think is really important is being able to talk publicly and articulate yourself very well. Because I noticed at Yale there are a lot of people who had some really good ideas, but if you really can't say what you're trying to say well, then no one's really going to listen to you. And then one other main point that I'd like to say is Model UN really gives you high respect for different viewpoints, which is really important in a situation such as at a Board of Ed meeting, when you have to be able to compromise and fight for what you believe in at the same time.
My name is Emily Diana, and I'm a senior at Watford High School. And they've already explained a lot about the details of the club, the details of the Yale conference. And I just wanted to give some more personal experience. I thought that one of the most valuable parts of the conference was the opportunity to speak with people from different countries. There were people from Jordan, China, Japan in my committee. We only had about 20 people. Yet there were probably 5 to 7 foreign people, and English was not their first language. They learned English at their school, and I was incredibly impressed by their public presence, how firm and steady they were, and how they were able to really, like you said, articulate themselves well, and then talk to them about their different opinions, how their life is in their different countries, their school system. And I think I've always been someone who I focus a lot on my schoolwork and what's happening right around me, but the global spectrum sometimes escapes my view, actually often does. So in this club, I've really been able to kind of get a grasp of how our government works, how decisions are made on a global scale that affect so many of us on such a deep level, and we might not even really think about. I mean, we were talking about the Russian energy hegemony, Islamophobia, and I was in the European Union, and I learned that, I mean, even in the UN, the groups don't have the same power as the European Union. We wouldn't be able to enforce the decisions we made. It was all recommendations, they were compromised. And for me to understand kind of how these great decisions are made and also see the views of the different countries. When representing a country different than the United States, I represented France, Romania. We have some Djibouti people in there, which was quite entertaining. But you realize that, the views of the United States aren't always crystal clear and agreeable to everybody, and to be able to see from different views, I think, helps us, politically, but just in our everyday lives. I think these were great experiences and skills for us to be able to attain through this club. So. Anything else?
Josh, wrap it up.
Okay, I'll just hand it off to John one more time. Thank you.
All right, so we're pretty much done. I hope you guys like that. All right. I hope you guys got a good idea of what our club is and how important it is to us, how much we got out of it. I really feel like the understanding that we got from foreign relations and the public speaking skills and all the things like that, that's just something that so many more kids should be able to experience in our school. It really helped make us better people, honestly. The only problem with our club that I thought we had, and I hate to end it on a note like this, is that we didn't really have any financial backing. So I understand why, completely. And so many kids were discouraged from coming to the EO or joining the club because it cost them a couple $100s to come on the conference. And I just really hope that whatever we decide to do for the pay to play, it helps accommodate those who are less fortunate. Because I was lucky enough to go, and I hope that many other kids will have experiences like that. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the initiative as well as also having a teacher.
Keep your remarks to 3 minutes. We will not, as I mentioned the other night, in order to keep it moving and to make it useful to everyone, we will not engage in direct debate or response at this time. If you have questions, we'll be glad to make notes and make sure you get the answer. So, there's a lectern here, and don't fight it. Over your turn. Thank you.
I'm talking to you tonight as a Waterford taxpayer. Just wanted to get that clear.
Linda, can you maybe?
I just wanted to express my concern about the effect the reductions of the 5 elementary teachers will have on students. There were discussions about sports and other programs last week, but not one more board member discussed or expressed concern about elementary class sizes. I've been attending these meetings for many years, and I have heard how important it is to the board to keep class sizes down at an effective level. And I was surprised that the 5 elementary teachers were eliminated without even a question from the board. Lower class sizes at the elementary level is critical to setting the foundation for academic success. Thank you for letting me express my frustration.
I'm not going to read the entire thing. I'm trying to keep it brief. I also have some letters and an email from a parent supporting the arts.
My name is April Brown. I'm an elementary art teacher, as well as a resident and taxpayer in Waterford. When I first started teaching, Waterford's elementary students had art, music, physical education, and Spanish. Sadly, the Spanish program was dropped a couple of years ago. Now we are facing cuts in the other 3 subjects. However, art will be taking the biggest hit. As it is, we see the kids the least and have the fewest teachers. This visual illustrates the time allotment of art through the past 20 years. Currently, there is a significant inequity of art versus music and PE. This disparity will be compounded if this new budget cut goes through. To summarize the information in the chart, the proposed art schedule would have all 1,100 to 1,200 elementary students having art for 17 and a half hours a school year, significantly less than the amount students currently have or in previous years. The proposed 17 and a half hours of art for a school year would be less than half the lowest state recommendation and less than a third of the national recommendation. The proposed hours for art are half of the proposed hours for music and physical education. On page 4, I discuss my opinions and suggestions on possible budget cuts. but for now, I would like to focus mainly on the importance of art. I could easily speak for hours about art and its benefits to a child's development, as well as society in general. For tonight's video, I'm going to quote excerpts from Secretary of Education Arne Duncan's speech titled, "A Well-Rounded Curriculum." As he mentioned many of the things I also want to express. He says, "If there's a message that I hope you will take away from today's conference, it is this. The arts can no longer be treated as a frill. As First Lady Michelle Obama has said, the arts are not just a nice thing to have or to do if there's free time or if one can afford it. Paintings and poetry, music and design, they all define who we are. All of you know the history all too well. For decades, arts education has been treated as though it was the novice teacher at school, the last hired and the first fired when things get tough. But President Obama, the First Lady, and I reject the notion that the arts, history, foreign languages, geography, and civics are ornamental offerings that can or should be cut from schools during a fiscal crunch. The truth is that in the information age, a well-rounded curriculum is not a luxury, but a necessity. I'm not going to sugarcoat the tough choices that many districts are facing this year. State and local school budgets are absolutely strained across the country. Many of you are fighting lonely battles to preserve funding for education and arts. There's no getting around that fact, and I applaud your commitment to fully educating America's children by engaging them in the arts. First, the arts significantly boost student achievement, reduce discipline problems, and increase the odds that students will go on to college and graduate. Second, arts education is essential to stimulating the creativity and innovation that will prove critical to young Americans competing in a global economy. And last but not least, the arts are valuable for their own sake, and they empower students to create and appreciate aesthetic works. It is not surprising that visual arts instruction improves reading readiness, or that learning to play the piano or to master musical notation helps students to master math. Reading, math, and writing require students to understand and use symbols, and so does assembling shapes and colors in a portrait or using musical notes to learn fractions. Now, you've all heard that advanced STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics courses will be essential to workers who want to compete in the global economy. Those claims are true. STEM courses develop critical thinking, problem-solving skills in math and science. They spur innovation, and they enhance self-direction. But as Daniel Pink, author of A Whole New Mind, has pointed out, good arts education accomplishes many of the same ends. The fact is that high-quality arts and humanities instruction are almost uniquely suited to stimulate imagination, creativity, and the ability to find adaptive solutions. Creativity, as Sandra Rupert, AP's director, notes, is a precursor to innovation and the cornerstone of entrepreneurship. Put another way, knowledge without imagination is not enough for students in today's fluid job market. Sorry about that. Imagination is more important than knowledge, Albert Einstein once reminded us, because knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world. It is no coincidence that Tom Friedman, the New York Times columnist and author of The World is Flat, predicts that the school, the state, the country that empowers, nurtures, and enables imagination among its students is going to be the winner in the rapidly evolving global economy of the 21st century. Despite these challenges and the tough budgetary climate, arts education must not just survive, but thrive. A well-balanced curriculum is simply too vital to our students and our national character to let the teaching of the arts and humanities erode." End quote. To quote former Governor Mike Huckabee, Education Commission of the State's chairman from 2004 to 2006, "I know both from deep personal experience and from the evidence that I have seen in schools that arts education must be a vital part of every child's education, from improving academic and student achievement to enhancing our nation's overall economic competitiveness. The arts offer many practical benefits. In fact, I would suggest that the future of our economy is based on establishing a creative class and creating a generation of people who can think artistically. That's why and arts education has value in and of itself. I urge this Board of Education to rethink cutting the arts, especially the art program, since it is already less than both music and physical education. You have the power to address this discrepancy, support the art program in a well-rounded curriculum for our children in Waterford. In fact, I think it is your responsibility to do so. Waterford can and should give them better than 17.5 hours of art education a school year, less than half the lowest state recommendation, and less than a third of the national recommendation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Hendrickson. This is Donna Gilberto. I teach elementary art at Oswegatchie School. Donna teaches both the middle school and the high school. Tonight, I come to you also as a self-proclaimed lobbyist. My clients are the children attending the public schools in Waterford. The visuals against the wall that are amazing were executed by my clients this year. These works of art, I'm calling Exhibit A. Emily, who was before you with the United Nations group, unfortunately, hers is against the garbage can. It should be way up high. She's going to be attending Yale as a minor in art next year, and I think we should be extremely proud of this work and what got her to this point. Our students don't do coloring pages in the art room. There's a progression in art from kindergarten to high school, and each progression is a small developmental step. These are students who create for love. They create for gaining hand and eye coordination. They create to see the world and appreciate our environment, and they create to let some dark feelings be expressed. In a public school, students will create art for all these and many more reasons. If your budget is approved, our art program, already minimal scheduling, will again be reduced. At the time when class sizes are increasing, our time with students with needs will be lessened even more. The public is really unaware of this cut since it was first posted as a 0.2 reduction, and it now turns out to be a 1.1 reduction in staff, and our staff is already stressed. I was around talking to parents. They were totally unaware. They thought it was a 0.2. I think somehow this is really not getting out to the public at all. Among the unified arts in Waterford, visual arts has had a much larger reduction in time and staff, and it will become basically a skeleton in the programming. In my lawyer lobbyist suit, I would also take you to know Exhibit B, which I've given over to Mr. Belair. Exhibit B is the Multiple Intelligence Handbook. It was given to me when I arrived here 11 years ago. I took this very seriously, and I believe that through art, you can teach math, language arts, writing, and even science is important to what we do. Through the multiple intelligence, we connect with those students who are wired to learn visually, wired to comprehend in a visual fashion. So in art, we have our motto: I hear, I forget. I see, I remember. I do, I understand. Art class is hands-on. As a curriculum leader, I promoted all elementary and middle school teachers to apply for the Picturing America grant sponsored by the National Endowment for the Humanities. That Donna presented to Mr. Belair is on the table as Exhibit C. This has become the basis for a large part of our curriculum. Again, we see multiple intelligence persist as a rich resource for connecting art and American history. Students see American history through the eyes of artists. Recently, the Boston Museum of Fine Arts opened its new American wing. I hope everybody gets up there. It's a totally amazing place. I think they thought it was about time to appreciate our own country's art. With cuts in the budget for visual arts, our Waterford students will not have a chance to appreciate our own country's assets. On behalf of my clients, the students of Waterford Public Schools, I hope you'll reconsider the cuts in our staff and understand the importance of our art programs. I hope you will recognize the importance of our program for our visual learners, for the students who need to express themselves, and for the students who just need time to learn how to solve problems visually in order to survive our modern environment. Thank you.
I hesitated to interrupt either of the previous two speakers, so they've obviously gone to great lengths to prepare a very good presentation, but I remind you, we would like to contain for 3 minutes, and I appreciate your cooperation on that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Kincasia, and I teach art at Clark Lane Middle School. I don't consider myself a public speaker, a smooth public speaker, so bear with my nerves. I am here because I think we're all strong advocates of what we do, and we believe in what we do. In fact, we've chosen art as our profession, our life's profession. 20 years ago, when I had to consider what I was going to be when I grew up, I was thinking about becoming a fine arts major or an art teacher. Being young, I thought, well, I'm going to be practical, become an art teacher, and I can be an artist on the side. And 20 years later, after teaching, I realized that teaching is my true love. I believe in it. When asked why I enjoy my job, I have to go back to my students. I think we're able to reach the non-traditional student who may not excel in the core subjects of reading and writing. They come to the art room and they are role models and they are leaders and they feel good about themselves, and they're a whole different type of student. Not all students will be college bound. Many kids need an alternative to hands-on, and this is one of the few subjects that's left at Clark Lane for them to be hands-on. It's good for them to come to a class where they feel good about themselves. It's very important. Art is important just because it's art, but I do not want to lose that non-traditional student that we are able to connect with. Thank you for listening tonight.
Hi, my name is Laura Berta. I have 2 children at the high school, and I'm just a mom and a taxpayer of Waterford. At home, things are getting difficult, as everybody knows. My husband has a Ford F-150 truck. I have a 4-cylinder Toyota Corolla. No, it's a Matrix. And we also have an old, I get lost in my words here. I have an old Volvo. Times are getting tough. Which car should we get rid of? I think it's the Volvo. It's costing us too much money. We could probably get lots of money for it. And I think the economy is getting worse, and we should start from the top and work our way down. And same with our education. We need to get rid of administrators first and work down to our teachers and to our programs. All the programs that you want to get rid of have to do with all the children. Golf, you heard from the art teachers, you've heard from tag program. It's hurting all our children of Waterford. And I think we should cut administrators. Like the nice lady said last week, the goose is not laying golden eggs anymore. We need to cut our budget. And I think it should start with administrators, not from the teachers who teach our children. In the middle school, our principal is going to be retiring, and we have 3 administrators at the high school. Could we put one of the administrators from the high school down to the middle school? It makes sense to us taxpayers. Why does it make sense to you? This Christmas, my kids want to buy their teachers some gifts for the school. You know what they gave? Paper. The teachers don't even have paper at our school. I mean, this is going a little bit too far. And I think, we don't need to employ another administrator in our school. we need to let go of a few. We need our teachers. We teach our children in high school that they need 80 hours of community service. And I think adults need to do the same too. I'm willing to give myself. My son takes basketball and baseball, and they just had a tournament for basketball. I volunteered because I think I'm a citizen of Waterford, and more adults should volunteer in our town. And I can see some faces up there that volunteer, and I know some behind me do too. But we need to teach our people in Waterford also to volunteer. I started a spaghetti dinner at Oswegatchie School. We never had a spaghetti dinner at Oswegatchie School until I came around. Some of the people in our program didn't want me to start a spaghetti dinner. I said, I'm doing it for the teachers. I appreciate what they do. They were teaching my child in an elementary level how to be on the computer, how to have art, how to, well, we no longer have our Spanish program. But I just think administrators should be the first to go, not our teachers. 22 students per class, we have ADD problems with our children. We need smaller room sizes, not larger room sizes. I was really upset with the meeting last week, and I just wanted you to know how I felt.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Jill Long, and I'm a mother of 5 children that all go to school here in Waterford. My husband Jesse and I moved here in Waterford 19 years ago because it was a great place to raise our children. Waterford has historically been known to invest in its children, whether it be sports, theater, arts, education, or its valued family values. We want to raise our children in a town where we'd be able to nurture their interests, whatever they may be. Of course, no town is without their issues, but I feel like I am unnaturally entwined in this debate, in the pay-to-play, in the sports, in the education, and whatnot. I could rant and rave about how unfair pay-to-play is because sports aren't out there for the kids and sports can pay for an education. I understand this firsthand because my daughter Alexa is on a full 4-year scholarship to play basketball. After playing 4 successful years here at Waterford. My son Nolan is being recruited to play basketball and baseball for schools like Wake Forest and University of Michigan. He's played in the preteen leagues and the teen leagues as well as here at Waterford High School. But this is not my biggest concern. This is not as important to me. I'm concerned for my job. I'm a first-year paraprofessional here at Clark Lane, but that still isn't my biggest concern. My son, Jackson, has a one-on-one aide at Oswegatchie that I love, and that still isn't my biggest concern. Still, I am upset and I'm concerned that the Waterford children aren't getting the decent education that they should get. I look at these gorgeous brand new schools and the construction going on at the high school, and I cannot help but wonder, if education is so valued and so dearly valued here, why are we cutting teacher positions and spending money on things? We're going to have 4th and 5th grade classes with 23 plus students in them. This is a mix of children with special needs as well as no special needs. My 2 youngest children do have special needs, and I don't worry about them because they'll demand the attention that they need. But I worry about little Jenny, who may not get what she needs from the classroom because she's too quiet. I worry about little Johnny, who may have a learning disability and it won't get addressed because there's too many children in the classroom. And it certainly would not be the teacher's issue, because when you have too many children to watch out for, there's just no way that you can address every issue to every child. Say what you want about teacher responsibility, but it becomes impossible to address everything. My son Jackson's teacher, Arilee Harper, was one of the teachers not to have her contract renewed. Arilee has been a godsend to our home. She is in constant contact with us about Jackson's progress, and she's the first one to congratulate him on any milestone. Arilee's fresh new approach to teaching is a wonder to witness.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Tracy Samatero, and I'm a resident of Waterford, and I have 2 sons. as my family has had a wonderful experience with all of my son's teachers, administration, support staff, and schools. Both my boys have received excellent educations, and I believe and hope that it will and can continue. The concerns I also have is about the proposed classroom sizes. I feel terrible for all the teachers who've lost their jobs and any teacher who will lose their job. But what saddens me the most is what our students will be losing. I have no doubt that the teachers can continue to teach well in a large classroom setting, because I have great faith in every teacher that I've ever interacted with at any of the schools. But what I've really learned to appreciate is the time that these teachers put into like an individualized education plan for each of their students. And I think the students just benefit so much from that. I feel that overcrowded classrooms will take away from this. I also think students having fewer specials, such as music, art, and gym, will also take away from the variety of curriculum that we expose our children to. It also will take away from the amount of plan time that teachers have to plan for their students. And bottom line on both sides is that the students again lose. And to just say one last comment, I remember attending a a PTO meeting prior to my oldest son even attending school. He was starting kindergarten in the fall, and I went to the meeting because Randy Collins talked about the 5 schools merging into 3, and I just remember many parents having huge concerns about the sizes of the classrooms once we did that. I believe that it was the Board of Ed's ideal guideline that stated that K through 1 ideally would like 15 students, which I think is fairly low, very low. It said that 2 through 3, 2nd through 3rd grade would have 18, and 4th through 5th grade would have 21. And I specifically remember asking Randy Collins about the schools and if the classroom sizes would get bigger, and he said that that's why they built 4 classrooms in each pod. There's 4 kindergarten classrooms, 4 first grade classrooms to accommodate keeping smaller classrooms. So I guess what I would eventually like to hear the board address is how they plan on working with the teachers so that they can continue to provide the level of education that our teachers pride themselves with providing to our students. And with more students in classrooms and less times for teachers to prepare, I just worry that might not happen. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vicki Spielski. I'm a parent and a resident of 2 elementary school students and an upcoming kindergarten student in the fall. They attend Oswegatchie Elementary School. Classroom size is also a big concern for me. We talk about moving forward, but it feels like we are moving backwards. For instance, we built 3 beautiful schools, and we are promised moving from 5 schools to 3 would not affect our children's classroom sizes. This doesn't appear to be the case. Our district prides themselves on their success on CMT scores and academic achievement. We support a TAG program, and our teachers and our teachers and support staff work hard to make sure every student finds success and that no child is left behind. How will we continue to do this if our classroom sizes get larger? Reducing the time of the arts and music curriculum affects how our children learn and what curriculum our children are exposed to. Reducing gym is such a bad example of how our children view the importance of physical activity. These classes offer students the opportunity to use their multiple intelligences, which ultimately affects their academics. I'm not trying to make it sound easy to find an ideal solution. However, please do not let the students' classroom experiences and education suffer.
Hello, it's me again. So, a lot of the speakers before me have spoken about a lot of the tangible scheduling, the class sizes, and as a student, an art student in the Watford program for the past 12 years or so, I wanted to talk about some of the less tangible, the more the qualities of art that are really important to me. And I'm nervous to do this partly because it's intimidating to speak in front of a lot of people, but also because art is such a broad subject and such a deep subject. It transcends words. So for me to try to convey to you what it means to me and how important it is really a daunting prospect. I'm sure you've all heard the expression that picture's worth 1,000 words. And obviously, I don't know if it's 1,000, 10,000, how many words. But when you look at cultures in the past, a lot of what remains is the art. It says so much about who they are, how they view the world. I know a lot of the pieces that I've done. I have some pieces over there. And actually, I want to make the point that the picture near the garbage can is not mine. It's a student from Lyme Academy. Just wanted to point that out. But all the stories I've done and have a very personal relationship. I did one of gardening tools. It's kind of representative of my childhood. And I recently did a puzzle self-portrait where I have my image. It's not here. It's in the display upstairs. And it's a puzzle, and that really represents who I am. Kind of trying to fit the pieces together, and art for me has helped me to fit those pieces together. As a very involved student, I find that I get overwhelmed a lot by the math, the writing, the science. I work very hard in it, and it's not that I don't do well, but I need that extra aesthetic aspect to balance it out. The right side of the brain for me, without balancing the right and the left, I don't know who I'd be. It changes the way you view the world. As an art student, the more you do the art, you see the light, the shadow, and it's an aspect that is incredibly important also in the professional world. I mean, as the people who are organizing a store, presenting yourself, you need to know what colors look good together, how spacing works. And just the idea that, education should be teaching us skills for the real world, but it shouldn't neglect the qualities that we need to be happy and to enjoy this world that we're given to its fullest. And especially, you're talking about possibly cutting elementary school art, and at that age, it's so critical about how they learn to view the world. That's when they're going through the questioning. They're learning, they're starting to wonder, like, who am I? What's happening around me? And to plant that seed of the art, of the creative aspect of themselves, something they can foster, and then they can develop it as they grow older, as they have opportunities. And I think that to cut that out, you would be, or at least to really diminish it, you'll reduce their enthusiasm. They won't have the time and energy to really explore it, and it also creates more two-dimensional people. We all want to be great. We dream of being great scientists, great writers, going to the best college we can, but we want to be as well-rounded and as full of a person as we can. So, I know this didn't help you at all with scheduling. I can't speak to finances and cuts, but I just want you to think about the qualities that maybe you're not going to see in the write-ups and all that stuff, some of the qualities that do transcend words. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Fogg. I went to all the Waterford schools, Cohansey, Clark Lane, Waterford High, and I graduated from Lyme Academy College of Fine Arts. I received my bachelor degree and a degree in painting. I actually just was told about this today, so I definitely wanted to take my time that I had free to come down here and just talk to you about how these schools have brought me to where I am today and how important art is to the world. And I couldn't say anything better than what Emily just said. And I actually was one of the assistant teachers at Waterford High School, and I was by Emily's side teaching her, things about color contrast. I actually helped her out with one of those paintings up there. And to see her not only pursue her career with academics, but also in the arts. They all relate to one another in the end. I'm sure we all know this, and it's honestly common sense. You wouldn't be in this building right now because who built an architect and they had to draw it. But other than that, I just wanted to tell you where it's brought me. I am, not only a graduate of a great college who, Mr. and Mrs. Weber got me there, and they're the ones who pushed me. Mrs. Kincasia, Mrs. B are here. It's like kind of weird running into them again after all these years, but it's a good feeling because I know they're the ones who brought me here where I am today, and obviously if they were the ones cut, where would I be? I am now a manager at a gallery, and it's right on Bank Street in London. I was offered the job through just graduating from school, and now I was given the chance to manage a gallery. So I'm not only, still involved in the arts, but I now have my own studio. I not only work on my art every day, but I'm also brought upon many people business-wise, art-wise. And a lot of people who aren't into the arts and it's not technically their thing, they don't realize how big that art world is. Not only have I met multiple artists, but also, people into the business and real estate. I could keep going on. It's all a connection, and without keeping it together, it's not, in the end, it's about our future. So in the end, you have to look at it as a whole, and we all relate to one another in some sort of way. So by going ahead and cutting back at that, we're not only affecting it now, but in the future.
Thanks for your remarks.
No problem. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa Guarnieri. I'm president of Waterford. I have a first grader at Great Neck. I wanted to thank you for your careful consideration, all the hard work you put into this process so far. I wanted to express my husband's and my dissatisfaction with the cuts to the PE, art, and music programs. When my first grader asked where I was going tonight, and I was telling him that I was going to a meeting to speak about the budget cuts and that we would only be having PE, art, and music possibly once next year, he burst into tears and cried and cried and cried. And I just feel like the wrong group of people, the students, are the ones that are suffering through this whole budget process. And I know it's difficult, and I don't know what the answer is. I just feel like the students should not be the ones that are bearing the burden of the economy. The previous speakers talking about art really said what I wanted to say way better than I could, but I do feel that the importance of the art and the music classes are really being underestimated and downplayed. And if you pull up studies on the internet, they talk about the different skills and the types of thinking that art and music classes teach, which aren't taught in the classroom when they're learning the math and the reading and the writing. And the thinking and the team building, and they're learning persistence and perseverance, and they're seeing their art and their music in, they're expressing their emotions in a larger sense of the world. They're expressing themselves personally, which they don't get to do in the classroom. The Harvard University study, Graduate School of Education, called Project Zero, I'd like to quote, it says, "The arts restore balance and add depth to the educational system, which is already skewed towards readily testable skills and information. We see new patterns in how to learn from our mistakes and envision solutions." I also was wondering if any of you have walked the halls of any of our elementary schools or have gone to the library and seen the artwork, and some of it's here. It's absolutely beautiful. But we have so many talented students here in Waterford, and I really feel that we owe it to them to give them what they deserve. Every morning I drop my son off at school, and I walk past the music room, and there are children playing all sorts of instruments, xylophones, and there's some string instruments, and kids are singing. There's kids out in the playground, and there's kids shooting hoops in the gym, and there's also that group of kids in the music room, and I just feel that it's a really important program that should not be downplayed. And as far as PE goes, I mean, we all know the statistics about childhood obesity and
I was going to speak for 3 minutes. I'll donate my time.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'll be quick. We all know the statistics about childhood obesity. It's an epidemic. Our children are becoming more and more sedentary, and I really think that's a really important thing that we should not cut. Thank you.
Sales. I'm a resident of Waterford, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just my kids' involvement in music and sort of give you an idea of their progression as students of music and music education in schools. As a member of their 4th grade elementary school band, my kids learned to be courageous by performing at school assemblies. By middle school, they were learning how to manage risk while soloing in their school jazz band. Through band, they were introduced to and grew to appreciate more gentle forms of music when news accounts warned of the harm caused to our children by listening to suggestive songs. They learned to be good ambassadors for their schools in their town while attending music festivals throughout Connecticut. By middle school, my kids learned to branch out and participate in community and festival bands where they eventually learned to perform for the benefit of sick children and needy families. When, in middle school, there were too few lunchroom seats because of overcrowding and too many cliques, my kids were welcomed by their band teacher, Mr. Hart, to teach in the band room. Soon, they were joined by other kids who felt ostracized by their classmates. The music department was a refuge from bullies. When forced to move last April, we felt better that our kids were band members. We knew that band kids are generally good kids, and that music would help them to make new connections at the new school. Their band director, Tim Fioravanti, helped to make that happen. He immediately plugged them into the school music website, where they could begin to communicate with other students. Mr. Reff loaned his marimba to one of my daughters, so one of my daughters could learn to play it in time for college auditions. Because of school music, she and her sister wanted to attend college to become music educators. When one of their classmates talked about his interest in custom drum building, Mr. F quickly placed an order for a custom snare drum. Without it, the student would be left idle, and maybe with too much time on his hands. Mr. F is a considerate, level-headed man, who in this room would vote to cut for cuts that could jeopardize his job or anyone else in the music department of schools. Music does not get the news coverage it deserves, partly because it takes time to perfect play. And our daily newspapers don't go out of their way to cover it unless they're asked. It is far easier to cover events that are predictable and occur with more frequency than band events. So, when there is a threat of funding cuts, it is easy to see why the public overlooks music's value to students and the community. But it should be no secret that when kids are involved in music in schools, they become better students and citizens. Isn't that what education is all about? Music cuts are short-sighted. Cuts affect many locally owned music shops and dozens of local music instructors whose income depends on our kids' musical needs. Some businesses reside in our towns and other towns.
Thank you for your comments,
One more
sir.
sentence,
I'm
please.
sorry you had over 3 minutes. Please wrap it up. Thank you. I'm sorry. I really am. But we have a lot of people who want to speak. The only way we can get through it is if we all... Thank you.
Hi again. Sorry, there's only 2 of us this time. The other team got sick. So, yeah, okay. I want to point out that we did speak at the last board meeting, which was all about the budget, and you guys kept talking about how we don't have $55,000 to spend. But we don't, say that. But we don't need $50,000. We're not asking for a full-time teacher to teach our program.
There's enough people in TAG in each grade for one class. The core teacher could teach it. It'd be set up a lot like the math program. It wouldn't cost any money, but it would still be educating us better as the TAG students.
And if you also want to have a TAG program, you can have an after-school program, which I believe is only about $2,000 per teacher. And I believe the last board meeting we made $11,000 off of the cuts. And I want to point out that the states that each local or regional Board of Education shall provide professional services requisite to the identification of school-aged children requiring special education, identify each such child within its jurisdiction, determine the eligibility of such children for special education pursuant to sections 10 through 76A to 10 through 76H, inclusive, prescribe suitable educational programs for eligible children, maintain a record thereof, and make such reports as the Commissioner may require. They have to be identified, and special services must be prescribed. The law does not mandate that those services be put into action. However, I'm sure that when the law was made, they intended for these services to be followed through with. We challenge the board to not simply meet the letter of the law, but to go above and beyond the intent of the law. We realize that you already have an advanced math program, but science and math are not the same thing. They may be related in some ways, but they're very, very far from being the same thing.
We'd just like to point out that this arrangement can be made easily, and it wouldn't cost any money. So, thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Rick Beatty. I was born and raised here in Waterford, attended all the local schools. Many of you up there know me. I have two sons in the Waterford school system, and the speakers in the last two meetings have been phenomenal. I mean, people are very passionate about what they want to defend and what they want for the kids. So, I agree with a lot of the stuff that was said last week and tonight. And these programs are all important to everybody. I think the most important thing that we got to keep in mind is the kids. Like I said, I went through the school system, had a great experience here. After college, I moved to Hartford area, where I met my wife and stuff, and decided to come back home, family and friends, but also because of the great experiences here in Waterford. I wanted my kids to experience that. And I was up here last year talking about pay for participate, and I have to say it was a very lukewarm response by the board, and I'm glad at least this year you're putting a lot of thought into it. Mr. Blair, I thank you for doing that. If that was your idea, to bring that idea into more conversation. I do believe that public schools should be public. I understand the budget crunch that we're all under. I work at AT&T. I should say that out loud, and believe me, there's a budget crunch there as well. But it's about the kids, and eliminating programs as the first option, I think, is really something we should do as the last option. The kids need to have these options, whether it's drama, whether it's music. I was in the band through elementary school, through sophomore year of high school, or sports. As many people know, I'm very actively involved in the rec programs in town here. The last 15 years, whether it's soccer, basketball, baseball, Little League, Babe Ruth, whatever it is. We have very good rec programs in Waterford, but they're not the same experience as playing for your high school. Freshman sports, varsity golf, indoor track, the experience you get playing for your high school, you get more field time. You just get a better experience, honoring your school and being able to play for your school. So, I'm very involved with the rec, and I'm a big supporter and proud of our rec programs here, but it is not the same. So I'm just curious to see how the pay for participation discussion comes out and what kind of thought you guys put into that. But again, I would just say that, I'm really disappointed. And years ago, I was a proponent of the 5 elementary schools. We had the referendum. We voted to go to 3 with the promises of lower class sizes, like many speakers have said up here. Great schools, which they are. But also they were supposed to save money, right? And now we come back here 5 years later, all the 3 schools are built, ready to go, everybody's there. Not only are we not saving money, we're cutting programs. So when I look at that vote, and I voted for 5, so I was a little upset that it was 3 in the first place, and now we're also cutting programs. Basic programs. Extracurricular programs are very important to the kids, very important to their development. So, I moved back to Waterford because I wanted my kids to have what I had. And I know it's a tough time out there, but we should be thinking about the kids first and doing everything we possibly can to get programs to the kids. And, I'm a fan of pay for participate if I have to. I'd rather have it be free. I'm not going to lie. But instead of getting rid of it, I would rather pay. Because I want my sons to have the experiences that they want to have. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patty Backus. I'm just going to make this very short and sweet.
I grew up in Waterford. I went to just about every elementary school that was here. And if I didn't go to the school, I've taught there. My sons both went to school in Waterford through 6th grade. One of them, well, they both majored in music in college. One of them got his master's in jazz performance at Rutgers University. The other one, in about 6 weeks, is going to get his doctorate in musical performance. And he's going to be a college professor, a trumpet doctor. He's going to fix 6 trumpets. But I just wanted to make the point that music is such an important part of my life, and I got that here in Waterford. It's incredible, an important part of my sons' lives, their wives' lives. They're both musicians. And I just hope that, I know this is a very difficult decision. These decisions are not decisions that you have chosen, that you want to make. I understand that. It's very difficult for you. I just hope that as you're, and I know you've heard everything tonight, just if you could just walk into my classroom or an art classroom or a PE classroom and see the joy in those kids' faces when they're creating. The unabandoned joy of singing, dancing. I had 5th graders today, they were doing a folk dance, they were having a blast. And they're learning things. They're learning sequencing, they're learning counting, they're learning patterns. These things are abstract things. They're doing them in the head. They're doing temporal, spatial things. It's different than putting it on paper. And it's so good for the brains, right and left sides, for how you think. All the research, I'm not going to go into that. I just want to make it short and sweet. I know it's difficult for you, but I hope I know you're wanting to keep the kids in mind. Please keep their faces in your mind. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Scott Zettler. I'm a resident in town, and I have 2 daughters in Great Neck Elementary. I talked last week about the TAG program, and I try not to rehash my comments from last week, but I do greatly appreciate the difficult task that you have. I mean, everybody here clearly has great passion for the things that they're up here talking about, and I think I'm no different. I mean, I'm sure you're all no different. At the end of the day, what I'm struggling with, and I'll preface it by saying through elementary, middle, and high school, and even college, I played in the band and orchestra, sang in the choir, and all that stuff. And music was very, very important to me. Art was enjoyable. It's very important to my kids. But at the end of the day, I think what I'm coming back to is to use Mr. Bellaire's word, which is excellence. And Waterford needs to stay committed to excellence in our school systems. And that's really what draws new residents. When people are looking at houses, they're very much looking at East Lyme, they're looking at Waterford, Stonington, Ledyard, they're looking at all the towns around. And excellence in education is critical. And fundamentally, I think that the TAG program delivers on that excellence promise. I know in terms of music and art, I definitely see the joy in my kids' faces, as Mrs. Backus just talked about. Last night I saw the joy in my daughter's face, because today she had a game day in TAG, and she was literally like jumping up and down because she was so excited, because they finished a unit and then they get a game day. But it's not like games like they play cards or something. They play like logic thinking games. They play math games. They're things that really drive them to develop their thinking skills, their analytical skills, and ultimately that's what I think will help them succeed in the future. Again, balanced education is critical, but at the end of the day, I think that we have to make different trade-offs. And I don't envy your position, but I want you to maybe just keep that one word, excellence, in mind when you make those difficult decisions. Thank you.
Hello. Nice to put a face with all the morning messages you leave me telling me that there's no school the next day. So it's nice to meet you. I'm Katie Gustafson. I have 2 kids at Great Neck Elementary School. Next year I'll have 3, and I'll be brief. Last year we were looking for a house, and when we moved here, I was so excited to find out from Mrs. Theodore that they not only have 2 days a week of art, but they have 2 days a week of gym and 2 days a week of music, and that is very awesome. and I think we should all be very proud of that because a lot of schools cannot brag about that. When we first moved here, one of many things that impressed me about Waterford schools was the amount of time the kids spent in art, PE, music, and library. With only 20 minutes of recess a day and a growing obesity epidemic in America among our youth, it is imperative that our children have time to exercise and also time to be creative throughout the day. What will happen to budding artists and to future musicians? How will they get their start? To take away any amount of art, PE, or music time would be a huge blow to our children. Imagine sitting for 6.5 hours a day with only 20 minutes to get up and move around or to delve into your artistic side. It is doing a huge disservice to both our students and to our staff who have to manage an ever-growing room full of children who have no outlet for their physical and creative energy. Let us, as Waterford Public School residents, lead by example. Do not fail our youth. Please reconsider cutting or reducing gym and music classes, and do not reduce the art program. My children and I thank you for your time.
Okay. My name is Heather Sturgill, and I have grown up in Waterford. I moved here when I was 7. I have 2 children, one at middle school, one in first grade at Great Neck. So I just want to say my basic concern over reducing art or music class exposure is the effect it could have on my children's future. Since art and music have been proven to promote imagination, creativity, self-expression, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills, among many other attributes, it seems only logical to provide our children with all the tools necessary to thrive in our culturally diverse and visually driven world. Also, my child loves art and music. He says art makes him very happy. That's to quote my 6-year-old. And there are several days he'll come home still singing about the songs that he learns from Mrs. Thipfel. So it continues all through the day. It permeates the whole household. So I think these positive experiences during the week balance more challenging and negative experiences that could otherwise sour his impression of education as a whole. I think it can be really tough. I have 2 out-of-the-box kids, and sometimes they don't want to sit and learn all the mundane aspects of education that we all have to learn. And I think to have PE and music and education balances the day. It makes it a more positive experience. And I think that to take that away, that would be really bad. Well, thanks for your time.
Okay, we appreciate all the comments. And would encourage you to continue keeping an eye on what we're doing and telling us what you think we ought to do. Just a few clarifications, I guess, and I don't want to make it a debate by any means. Our difficulty is we have to find either persuade the Board of Finance and the RTM to give us more money, which I would appreciate your help maybe in getting them to do that, but I don't think it's going to happen. Given the situation, we have to find $1.2 million worth of reductions in what we have proposed. We have, over the last several years, made many economies. There was mention made of administrators, and I know that that's always a topic. Over the last couple of years, we've reduced the number of administrators in the central office by 2.5 positions. We can look at further reducing the number of in-school administrators, but I have to tell you, it's not. There are no high schools in Connecticut with an enrollment of the size of Waterford High School that have only 2 administrators. The problem with moving one of them to Clark Lane is that means that what was being done by that person at Waterford doesn't get done. I don't know. It's very difficult for all of us, but again, the bottom line is unfortunately that we have to find $1.2 million in reductions. And If anybody has a suggestion as to how we can do that without making the cuts or the changes that we're proposing, we'd love to hear them. Nobody believes in art and music, Jim, more than members of this board. And believe me, it's not the reason why we ran for the Board of Education to eliminate these kinds of things, but we are in a position that we have no choice but to make some very tough, very difficult decisions about how to continue to provide a good education for our children when we don't have the resources to do it. And that's the position we're in. Thank you for your input, and like I said, I hope you keep coming and keep interested in this, because we're going to have a lot more difficult decisions to make as we go along. Thank you. All right.
We have some items from action, Mr. Chair, from our executive session this evening.
Right. Okay, we have, first of all, a pupil personnel matter that we need to act on. There's a motion. Is there a motion? Jody?
Next, make a motion that the Waterford Board of Education accepts the stipulated agreement for student 2011B, who was the subject of our executive session. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Second item that we discussed was personnel and contract non-renewals.
If I could just give a little background, we need to comply with the Connecticut General Statute 10-151, and therefore tonight I'm recommending that the following teachers not be renewed for the 2011-2012 school year. This action is attributed to the lack of available position related to a staff reduction under consideration in the district's budget for the 2011-12 school year, and not due to performance. I need a motion.
Well, I reluctantly have to make this motion, but as Don mentioned, we have to make tough decisions. I move that the Waterford Board of Education moves that the contracts for the employment of Barbara Comstock King, Michelle Condon, Helen Getty, Donna Gilberto, Stephanie Glenn, Ariel Harper, Mary Hendrickson, Michael Manifold, Catherine McDonald, Michelle Becker, and Megan Sheehan not be renewed for the following year upon their expiration at the end of the 2010-2011 school year, and that the superintendent of schools is directed to advise such persons in writing.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Thank you.
We have a consent agenda item this evening.
On the consent agenda, we have the minutes from the February 17th regular board meeting, and the monthly expenditure report for February, the food service report for January, and the health insurance year-to-date claim summary through February. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any corrections, additions? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Correspondence.
I have some items that I'd like to share with you. If you recall, last Monday at the March 15th meeting, I shared with you a number of letters from parents and members of the community supporting the Talented and Gifted program. Over the course of the week, I've received correspondence from Mr. Fitzpatrick as well as Mrs. Fitzpatrick in support of physical education classes. Today I received an email from Teresa Walensky from the RTM commenting on pay to participate and having us take a serious look at that. as well as regarding the TAG program at the middle school, encouraging us to find a way that there are other options versus hiring a teacher. And later in my report, I'll share a couple of updates for you.
Thank you. We obviously have all received a number of letters and memos from many of you on these issues, and I won't go through the detail, but to assure you that we've got them, we do look at them, we do read them. All right. Superintendent's report.
I have a couple of things, and I think first where I'd like to start is to thank the many members of our public, as well as our students who spoke so well this evening. And I'd like to take you back to last Monday evening when I presented not only to the board but also to the public the critical dilemma that we're facing right now. We have a budget increase. The budget was to go forward as presented of nearly a $2.9 million increase. Last week I shared with the public that the predominant drivers relate to two items. The first being our health insurance. And our rates are factored on our usage of our health insurance. And we have nearly an increase of $1.6 million, or approximately a 31% increase in our health insurance. That's the biggest driver in this particular budget. The next driver relates to all of our contracts and our obligations for all our employees. That's an increase of nearly $1.1 million. That brings us to $2.7 million. The remaining drivers exceed just over $200,000. That's fuel, that's increases in Social Security and Medicare contributions that we need to make. That's the $2.9 million. When you look at the rest of the budget, it's all red. It's all negative. And so we have an important decision. And I felt your compassion as you spoke tonight, because I have to tell you, this is my 7th week here, and that's all I've been facing, is trying to figure out how can we balance this budget. We have a guideline from the Long Range Planning Committee of our Board of Finance, which looks at a 3% increase to the budget. And I want you to think about this during this tough economy across our country. 3% is a decent increase. The difficulty for us is where we stand with our health insurance. So 3% represents $1.2 million. The work that we've been doing on this budget is to reduce it by $1.7 million. The first round, the first phase, was nearly $600,000. And last week I presented 49 different items that represent $1.2 million. This has not been an easy task whatsoever. Not an easy task. And the reason for the 49, with the administrative team, as well as with staff suggestions from across the district, as well as from parents and community members that emailed or called in suggestions, we looked at all of those items. And it's from a variety of areas. Last week when I was presenting, the first 24 or 25 of those items all dealt with operations before we ever got to program, before we ever got to staff. That's where we started. At the heart and at the center of our decision-making and recommendations related to getting at the operations. What can we do different? Such as extending rides on buses, reducing our bus fleet by 2 buses. That was absolutely critical. We have retirements coming up at the end of this school year. We have some funds remaining in our salary account. Let's utilize those funds to pay off those retirement benefits that we're obligated to pay now rather than next year. So we have looked at many, many different areas on how can we take care of those increased costs before we ever get to staff. So $650,000 approximately was reduced from operations before we even got to staff. And then the difficult plight, quite frankly, of how to continue the reduction. And you'll find no bigger fan of art, music, and physical education. And what we're looking at the elementary level over a 6-day cycle is 2 class periods of physical education for all of the students, 2 music class periods, in addition to those students who play a music instrument, for some pull-out time, release time, to have those practices and rehearsals. The reduction is in the area of art. It's one art class during that 6-day cycle and one class period of library. And those were the impacts at the elementary level, as well as reducing 5 staffing positions. Class sizes are a little bit larger. Our goal was to have class sizes, in particular at the early grades, anywhere from 16 to 20. There are no class sizes projected to be over 20 at this point in time. The upper grades in grade 4 and 5 are between 23 and 24. We looked at extracurricular programming. We looked at athletic programming. We discussed pay to participate. We looked under every rock. At this point in time, our elementary tag program is in place. I've asked our middle school administrators to take a look at our talented and gifted program at the middle school, and is there a way with the existing staffing to provide some additional opportunities, not only during the day, but also at the end of the day. And one of the things I think is important for the public to understand, the talented and gifted program in our elementary grades deals with accelerated math. That continues at the middle school. That doesn't go away. Our students are accelerated into pre-algebra, algebra, and geometry if they're ready. So we continue that cycle in the middle grades. What's added is some additional time for science, and that's 60 class periods. Our students by grade level are in small groups for a trimester. Our goal is to try to figure out how can we continue some enrichment in that particular area. But I have to tell you, we're dealing with a Sophie's choice when we're looking at this budget. We're working very, very hard to stay within that 3% guideline, and we are. And on Monday night, we're presenting a budget that fits that guideline. But I can tell you there's a lot of sacrifice within this budget. But our goal throughout the entire process was to keep the student in the center and to minimize the impact. But I can also tell you, $1.2 million is a lot of money. But we were looking at 10,000 here, 20,000 here, 50,000 there in order to get to that particular point. So where we ended last Monday, I was to go back and do a little more research on pay to participate. So within your packet, you have a draft of a proposal. It's not for adoption tonight, but it's again to continue some guidelines for us. So I'd like to give you some background. At the end of last week, I met with both the middle school and the high school administration, as well as with Dave Souza, our athletic director. We looked across the state for some guidance. We know that Avon has had pay to participate for a number of years. We looked at Shelton. We looked at Bacon Academy. Ledyard within our DIRD in our area also has a pay to participate program. Our goal in all of this was to be fair and equitable, not to turn any student away for any reason. So we have a guideline in there with any free and reduced lunch student that there would be a waiver of the fee. For any student or family that presented hardship, we would waiver that fee. We're looking at the high school level, per sport, a $50 participation fee. But the maximum is for two sports. No student would pay more than $100, and no family would pay more than $200. That would be a cap. What I placed at your table, I needed time over the weekend to generate what perhaps revenue might look like. We also looked at the activities at the high school, extracurricular activities for a nominal $25 participation fee. What would that look like, and what would the revenue perhaps that we could generate? We looked at the middle school program. For athletics, it's a $25 fee, and for the activities, it's a $10 fee. So what we noticed at the middle school level between the activities, the extracurricular programs, and the sports, that would be approximately $9,600 in revenue. So you think about the kinds of activities that we might be able to support with those dollars. At the high school, it would be a little over $30,000 from athletics, and then an additional $5,200 from activities. I think we need to increase some clerical time minimally in order to manage the books and collect the fees. So potentially there could be $44,000 in additional revenue. Now we had some conversation last week in regards to perhaps using these funds a little bit differently. And what I would like to put on the table for our conversation and discussion, generally these funds are used to support the activities from which the funds are raised. So any money raised in athletics would offset any of your costs. And last week I used the example that your officials are subsidized through your gate revenue. So you perhaps could use these revenues to offset some other line items within your budget. What it does is it reduces your athletic budget. And then it frees up funds in the larger budget to be used elsewhere. But not to purchase a fourth grade teacher, not to purchase an art teacher or a music teacher, but the funds go specifically to athletics. It reduces your athletic budget and it frees up some additional funds. So we have on the table in our conversation last week the elimination of indoor track as well as golf, and also some extracurricular activities with some ensembles in the area of music with clarinet, woodwind, brass, and percussion. And so the key is that if we were to utilize any of the funds, perhaps they could be used in that area. But I also want to raise this caution. I shared last week that our budget is a very fluid process. On March 15th, that's what we knew. Today, I think, is, the 24th? Here's what I know since the 15th. We have 10 students who have been accepted in the new marine science school over in Groton. We were projecting 5. The tuition was $3,500. We received notification that the tuition is now $4,500. That's $45,000 of funding that we need to provide. The second item is following that meeting, and again, we were doing this in a very quick time frame in order to present a budget to the Board of Finance. Greg Powers and I went back and we looked at all of the elementary special schedules in the area of art, music, PE, and library, and really looked at the staffing. And so there's some differences in the staffing that would net us some additional savings. But I'm also concerned about a couple of hotspots with class sizes in the elementary level. And we also have kindergarten registration next week. And so right now we're projecting an enrollment for kindergarten, but until we complete the kindergarten registration, it's going to be difficult to clearly identify the staffing need. I mentioned that it's a fluid process. We have time. We have the Board of Finance coming up next week. We have the RTM later in the springtime. And at that time, we'll have a clearer picture as to where we stand enrollment-wise, funding-wise, and we'll continue to work on this budget process, and it may allow us to do some different things. But one of the things that you asked is that we go back to the drawing board, bringing back something related to pay to participate, and what might that look like. So, again, we present the proposal to you for some further discussion.
All right, thank you. I think it would be actually procedurally better to move to add discussion of this pay to participate proposal as new business item. Perhaps the first item in the new business. Then we would finish hopefully the committee and other reports, and then start discussion of that item. Is there a motion to add discussion of the pay to participate proposal to new business? So moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, we'll put that in as item.
First item.
First item. That would be great.
So I think it's important to keep in mind from a middle school TAG position, we're back to the drawing board. Our goal is by the end of this school year to come back to the board with some possibilities with the existing staffing levels that we have, that we can continue to broaden and strengthen the enrichment opportunities. And then the other piece that's important to keep in mind is that we do have some money that I would call contingency for right now. And it's approximately around the $35,000 range. And so, again, we need to kind of hold firm. This budget is extremely tight. I would say to you, I'm also concerned as to what our fuel prices will be next year. We've budgeted based upon some guidance from our finance director here in town at a particular dollar amount. That was before Libya. And so I think we also need to keep that in the back of our minds with our budget proposal.
That's all I got. That's what
You do have a new budget book that reflects all of our work and discussion last Monday. I want to recognize Michael DeRay for, under tremendous time pressure, really redoing this entire budget. We'll be delivering it to the first selectman as well as our Board of Finance members tomorrow for discussion on Monday night.
All right. We'll move on to committee and other reports before picking up discussion on these items. Do we have any reports? Any reports? John?
At the last meeting, I mentioned that we have a committee that was set up in December to look at alternatives to the healthcare model that we currently have. We met last on March 8th. I think we're making some very good progress. We looked at data, sort of parametric data, meaning that if we modify this, modify that, what might be the projected savings. So I think we've gotten a good feedback that there are some savings that could be had. We are right now headed down the path of soliciting competitive bids from multiple providers, and we certainly anxiously are awaiting the results of that. Primarily, that data would be used to negotiate the next set of contracts. I think the superintendent has agreed that if there is something that comes out of that can be factored into next year's budget, that certainly would need to be negotiated with each of the bargaining units. But I think we've not ruled that out. But again, I think we're headed in the right direction as far as looking openly at alternatives. So I think we're quite anxious to get the results of that and hopefully be able to fold that in again either next year or certainly into the next contracts. But that is as the superintendent mentioned, that is one of the key factors as to why we're having these budget difficulties at this time. So we'll continue to work that.
Thank you, John. Other reports? Kathleen?
Yes, the Friendship School Governance Board met, Jody, Jessica, and myself, and just to report that there were 360 applications and 160 families were notified of acceptance. I believe 96 were from Waterford and 60 from New London. It was also agreed that the teachers would end their school year on the 23rd, that they would continue with the half days on Wednesdays, and hopefully, to avoid any transportation conflicts, would look for dismissal at 1:40, so we would still have our buses. And they're also looking at the NEAS 2-year report. They're in the mid stream right now. Also, just to remind anyone that's here today, we're talking about all these budget issues. I will say a few words after when we get to the next item. But we do have a spelling bee coming up on March 30th, which is being sponsored by the Waterford Education Foundation, and those funds are usually used to support some of the activities and to provide grants. So I just encourage people to come out and support the foundation. The Board of Ed will participate with Sherry, Jessica, and John as members. So I'm just encouraging people, I think, and I'll speak a little more to that later, just about new ways that we have to raise revenues in town.
Any reports? David?
Mr. Chairman, I have two items to bring up. Number one would be with CAVE, the work is being done on the convention or the workshops. In November, most of the workshops have been set. That will be a mistake. The other item is something that I wanted to do. I wanted to recognize the activities that Mr. Sales brought up before with Mr. Fiavante. our Waterford High participated in the Berkeley College of Music High School Jazz Festival the beginning of March 5th. All the groups, the chamber choir, the jazz combo, and the jazz ensemble placed very well, with the jazz combo coming in 4th and the jazz ensemble coming in 3rd. And I would think there had to be maybe 300-400 schools being represented up there, so it's quite an accomplishment for the schools.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Julie?
I have only 2 reports tonight. The first one is the Waterford School Building Committee. We had a meeting last week, and we spoke about, I just wanted to bring you up to date on what's going on at the high school. As far as site work goes, that's what they're working on right now. The stripping of topsoil, vegetation, and turf with the proposed access road is ongoing. Tree clearing is completed. Temporary parking lot is completed up to the process base. Widening of the loop road is completed up to the process base. An installation of an 8-inch water main in front of the existing school was started on February 23rd and is still ongoing. East side drainage pipe installation is scheduled to begin on 3/10, which was a couple weeks ago. Detention basin relocation evacuation will also start on March 10th. The geothermal well installation is expected to start in April. And several people have mentioned to me about the baseball field. The baseball field will be usable as of April 14th. That's what they told me.
Weather permitting.
Weather permitting. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions about the school building committee that you'd like me to bring back? Yeah, that's my next report. No? Okay. Now I have a Youth Service Bureau report. Tomorrow night, as most of you know, it's a big, big night. They're going to host Dancing with the Stars at Waterford High School at 7 o'clock in the field house. And we hope you can come. It's a free event. You do have to have a ticket, though, to get in. There's going to be snacks, and I think everybody, it's going to be a nice family night, so I hope everybody can come. The Youth Center has also been very busy with counseling. They have a lot of requests, and they're trying to service as many students or children as they can. They're hosting an American Girls trip to Boston, and also, unfortunately, a Yankees game instead of a Red Sox game. The Challenge program is working out very well. Pat Flanagan he's a Waterford high school graduate, an athlete, and he's also a police officer now. He's going to be teaching that program. I just wanted to make everybody aware of a WADE program. WADE is part of a regional review board, and Groton City, New London, and Waterford. What happens is if a child gets arrested in any of these towns, they'll be sent back to their own town for them to be dealt with, rather than have to go, through other area towns. And so far, the regional review board has been working very well. The skateboard park is opening is open. It opened on March 20th. And as all of us know, the Waterford Youth Service Bureau, along with other town agencies, we've been going through our budget process too. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Any other reports? I'd like to make a brief legislative report, call it that, for lack of anything better. As you all know, the legislature is in session. The governor has made his budget proposal, and his proposal is to continue level funding the educational cost sharing grant, which, of course, level funding is not great considering costs keep going up, but considering that 14% of what have been budgeted in the last 2 years came from federal funds that are no longer available, we could be in very bad shape if the governor hadn't agreed to find those funds from other sources. But I also have to point out that that's what the governor proposes. The final decision's up to the legislature, and there are many, many groups who were not so lucky in the governor's budget, and they are working mightily to get at least some of their funds back. Since the educational cost sharing grants is about $1.6 billion part of the budget. That's an obvious place for legislators to look to hack little pieces off here and there. So we cannot assume that we will indeed get what we are projecting in terms of educational cost-sharing funds. And if any of you have not talked to our representative and senator recently, I would urge you to check in often. The other thing that I have to point out is that the big news is about the ECS grants, and that's great, and a lot more important for some of the big urban areas than it is for Waterford, fortunately. Although I was just doing a quick calculation, if we didn't get that extra 14%, we'd have to find another 200,000 somewhere. But perhaps more importantly, there's no firm commitment for the funding level for the excess cost reimbursement for special education. And we have projected in our budget, I had it here just a minute ago, about $580,000, and that could well not come through. And that's money that goes directly to the Board of Education, and if it turns out to be only $300,000, there's another $280,000 that we would have to find cuts for someplace else. I don't want to be gloomy. And all of this is just to say, keep an eye on what's going on out there, and make sure that just because we think we've got a good deal from the governor, we can't afford to say thank you and forget about it. It's not over. Okay. Any other reports, comments? If not, we'll move on to new business. And the first item is the new piece that we put in, which is discussion, no action at this point, but discussion of the pay to participate proposals. I emphasize that this is what we received as a draft, although very detailed, and I commend the staff and the administrators for putting this together so quickly and in such detail. But this is at least an outline of what we might be considering. So, with that said, comments, questions, discussion. Sherry.
Just a quick question. I'm wondering how we came up with the prices for the different activities. There's a difference between the extracurricular activities at the high school and the parkway. I'm just curious about the differences in prices.
We really looked at the frequency of meetings and the length of time. And so with the athletics, there's much more time that's given to the activities. We also looked at the nature of the age, and with high school being a little bit more expensive for the intensity and, again, length of time. And we also wanted to be very fair and be realistic.
I have one clarification point. So the proposal that the athletic and activity fees would be separate caps, so that, for instance, a Waterford High School family could come up with a total of $400, $200 for activities and $200 for athletics, or is that?
200 for athletics and 200 for activities. That's
right.
correct.
So if they have a very active kids, it could be $400 per family.
We also, quite frankly, used this year's data that we had to really project this out. We have just a handful of students that are beyond 2 sports, and so the third sport would be for no cost, no participation fee. And so we really kind of looked to see how many would fit into these categories.
Discussion? Tim?
I just want to go on record as being in favor of this. I don't know if we've got all the bugs worked out, but it looks pretty workable. I want to say that it is not an ideal situation, and that nothing of this nature would be something that I would want to do without our present crisis situation. But I think that it is the lesser of evils, and I certainly am in favor of it if it can save some programs. I think that we need to be clear that because this is a pay-to-participate program, that I think that it's essential that any monies that are realized through this program go to the activities that generate the money. And I don't think that in any way prioritizes activities or cuts that we have made. I think this is a discrete solution to a discrete problem. And I think we need to keep that in mind, because nobody up here has liked the process of making choices. I'm an art teacher, and if you think that I'm happy about eliminating art, you are wrong. My child, when he was in middle school, was saved by the TAG program. It was the best thing that ever happened to him. If you think that we're happy about eliminating that program, you are wrong. But this is a solution to a particular problem, and I think that it's a reasonable solution. And I think that it will help keep us from eliminating a couple of good programs. I am particularly concerned that without indoor track, our women's offerings in the winter are limited to basketball and cheering. That's maybe 40 girls. That's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned as a coach. We have multiple offerings for women's sports in the fall and in the spring, and in the winter we have essentially very little for them to do without the indoor track program. And I just think that leaves us in a very bad position as far as women's sports goes in the winter.
Other discussion? Other comments? Yes, Becky.
Been relatively quiet this evening, and first of all, I just feel, since this does relate somewhat to the topic, I feel compelled to just say, and I know the superintendent expressed it very well, but I feel compelled that as a board member to say that this has been an extremely painful process for all of us, and that when Len came up and spoke, I think last week I did say that we've all looked at this budget inside out and struggled with trying to find the funds so the staffing did not need to be cut. But the bottom line is that the funding is just not there. So I just want to go on record by saying that I want to appreciate all the hard work that has gone into the school system over the years, and if there was a way that we could find this funding, we would, believe me. So given that prior comment, I'd just like to say that I'm not in favor of the pay to participate particularly. I don't think, we brought this up a few years ago, the Waterford Education Foundation was formed in order to, we were looking ahead at this kind of a situation, not knowing that we would have this healthcare cost claims that would be so astronomical. This is what hit us, really, that it's, and I don't want to sound naive to think that this could be a passing situation. I'm understanding better that this may be the reality for a while, that we're going to be faced with this kind of severity in the economic situation. So with that, I'd like to say that I really believe that the time has come for us to be enormously creative and innovative and to seek private monies, corporate monies. The Board of Education Policy Committee began a few years back looking at advertisement naming. I'm not suggesting that. I don't know what the complete answer is, but I think that it's time that we go back to the policy level. We talked about the school districts that do pay participate, but we haven't talked yet about those districts that do some sort of discrete sponsorship, some sort of discrete advertisement. There may be a way. I'm not suggesting that that's the total answer, but I feel that before I can really ask the parents to, again, to pay to participate, that I would like us to do the full research. Now, having said that this is a fluid process, I'm happy to say that, and I'm trying to cooperate to the best of my ability this evening, because I could go through these cuts that I'm very unhappy about in a number of areas, but I'm going to wait till I have the answer to how do we put these programs back. My goal as a Board of Education member is to really look to see how do we improve the system, how do we maintain the excellence that we've worked so hard to build here over the years. I think we still have an excellent system with the hard work that's gone into this budget. but I think it's time that we really need to be looking to what's happening in the next few years. So I would like to propose that the policy committee go back and that we put this on the next agenda to seriously begin looking again at private monies. I made some phone calls today to some of the corporations that were mentioned, and there is money out there. We just need to find how to get it within our own community, within the businesses and the sponsorship, so that we do have a revenue source already set up that we could ask for the grant monies in that way. So I'm, for one, I would say that I would never support pay to play if we tried every other avenue and we could not fund the additional funding.
I just want to echo the comments that Tim and Kathleen had made, and also one of our speakers, that none of us are really in favor of pay to participate per se, but we have found ourselves with our backs against the wall in a situation we've never seen before. And the only I will most likely support this. My main concern is that we have a Board of Finance and a Board of or an RTM that will eventually say to us, well, if we did this, can we increase these costs to raise extra revenue, or can we find other ways to make revenue? And I think what we're doing is we're putting an extra tax burden on a few people in the town, when the whole process of the town tax system is to be equitable to everyone, and I have a little bit of a problem with that.
John?
Well, I'm going to say that I will never support a pay to participate fee system. I believe that the extracurricular activities that we offer, whether they are athletics or in the arts or music or clubs and what have you, are a part of the educational experience that we should be providing our students. I have a hard time trying to discern the difference between pay for participate and pay for go in math class. It's something that we offer, and we need to offer our students for the total educational experience. I will never support pay for play.
Other comments, discussion?
John said exactly what I was going to say. I do understand our responsibility in order to come up with money. And as Kathleen said, I really wish the policy committee would go back and discuss corporate sponsorship, but also maybe think of some other ways we could raise money, especially for sports and extracurricular activities. But as John said, I think extracurricular activities, especially sports and art and drama and music, they're all part of their educational experience, and I think we owe it to those students and the families to provide that for their children without making them pay.
Sherry?
I do support pay to participate. As we heard last week or last month, whenever it was that we met, our last meeting, almost everyone in the room that got up and spoke said that they wanted us to implement something like this to help our budget. I work for a not-for-profit company, and we're located in Waterford, but we're a regional entity, and we're out there asking corporations for money all the time for our programs. And I have to tell you that it's very difficult right now to get money from anywhere. And so I don't think that we should get our hopes up that we're going to find the white knight that's going to come in and rescue our programs. We tried this last year or this year with freshman sports, and we weren't able to. So I think we need to be cautious of that.
Anyone who hasn't spoken yet want to say something before Kathleen?
I don't want to get in an argument here, but I'm going to bring something up that there are other programs that are being hit. We have a Learning Through Service program that when you look at the budget, you don't realize right away that the cuts are more severe, that this could start to impact the Learning Through Service. But I don't want to talk about it without having a solution. Therefore, I made some calls to nonprofits to see that our students are giving something on the order of 20,000 hours of volunteer time that service our community, from the youngest to the the oldest, and the nonprofit, Sherry did come back and say that they would be willing to help participate. We might be able to apply for grants. It's a small amount of number to come up with the funding. So I think the board really, I think we're doing a good job looking at every single item, trying to find the solutions, but maybe we can let's see what other alternatives are out there before we make our final. I know you're talking about the budget being fluid, so I hope that we might, if we see we can generate some extra revenue, to see where we are in a few months with that.
I think the important thing for us to keep in mind, we have to have the money in hand. I mean, we have to start with a balanced budget. You all have a statutory responsibility to end the year in the black. So, that's an important piece. The other thing that I want us to think about is that in anything that we're talking about, we can view it as a pilot. It's a one-year look, and that we do frequent updates, and then we do a review of it before we cast anything in stone. So if, as we're having this conversation, if we're looking at this for, let's give it a shot for a year, see where we are, the pluses and minuses of it. Certainly in our conversation with both Don and Mike and also with Dave, our athletic director, our goal was to make sure that we maintain the level of participation and even increase it. We don't want to see anything fall back. So, it's another way to view it. We do have a very short window if we're going to do any kind of sponsorship and a commitment. We're a little bit different. We're not a business, so we need to explore that, absolutely. But we really need to have a budget that's fully balanced.
Just one concern that I have, and I'm all for exploring any revenue streams that we could find. The difficulty lies in creating a revenue stream that is reliable and renewable. And I don't know if any kind of sponsorship or advertising or anything of that nature is all that reliable or renewable. Pay to play, if it was instituted and was successful, would be a fairly reliable source. We would know pretty much the kinds of monies that we could count on in receiving year to year based on our participation rates. And so at least then budgeting wise, it's much easier for us to deal with because we have a pretty good handle on how much we can get. Other monies might be, you may have good years, you might have off years. That's difficult for us to deal with because we're budgeting and we have to know how much revenue we're having to come in order to know how much we can spend. So that's just my only concern about those alternate revenue streams is that we need to find a way to make them renewable and reliable.
I don't want to say never, but I, at this point, am not convinced that pay for participation is fair, equitable, or even moral in some sense. If we constantly say, as a matter of fact, education people often call them co-curricular activities rather than extracurricular activities, emphasizing the fact that it's part of the education. And my view is that if it really is a necessary part of the education, then we should provide it. If it's not, then why are we wasting our time and money doing it? And I've said over and over again, it's a public responsibility. It's not what makes public education. And that's my philosophical opposition. But I have some practical oppositions to it, too. I know that a lot of people, and I bet if I asked it right now for a show of hands, everybody here would say, I'd really be picking $100 or $400 or whatever so my kids can participate. But Waterford is not, how do I say it? Waterford is not a homogeneous suburban town. A lot of people look at Millstone and the revenue that we've had over the years and think of Waterford as being an upper class or at least solid middle class suburban town, and there is a big portion of that. But there are people in Waterford. I mean, we do give free and reduced lunches to people. there are people in Waterford who literally have to choose between a lunch and making the fuel payment. They exist, and there are not a few of them. And there are quite a few that are just above the free and reduced lunch level that are making the same kind of difficult decisions. And for somebody who is solidly employed or even not employed, but at least well educated, and as soon as the economy comes back, with all hope will be employed, to say, oh, I don't mind, I can pay $400, it doesn't matter to me, that fine, why don't you chip in? But I can't see, I've had trouble with trying to make people that honestly have a difficult decision to make have to decide between paying for their children's education and paying for their children's food. And I would find it very, very difficult to vote for a plan that, in my mind, does that. But I'm only one member, and we're not going to act on this tonight anyway. But it will be back, and I'm sure at some point we will have to. Any other discussion on this, Jody?
I just have a question. Have we looked into other ways that we might be able to still offer indoor track, maybe combine with other schools?
Well, you have the size of our school and with the numbers, you're really guided on whether you can co-op a program, and that's something that I explored with Dave. And due to the size of our high school and the numbers of kids that would participate in the activity, we're not talking about 3 or 4 students. We're talking about a large number. We can't do the co-op agreement.
Could we maybe rent out, because Tim had said we have one of the best indoor tracks. Could we rent it out to other schools and charge them? I'm just...
I just want you to know, moving in this direction is a lot of work and a lot of effort to be thinking about the public school as a private school, that we need to raise donations and set up a foundation and do all of that. And we know the difficulty that we're having just with the Waterford Educational Foundation with raising significant funds. And I think, as Sherry spoke about, from the commercial end of things, this is not the easiest time to garner large donations. It's tough.
Any further discussion at this point? Yes. If not, let's move on to something that hopefully is not quite so difficult, although the next item, which was the first item on the new business agenda, is discussion and possible action on a policy. The first item is the Healthy Food Certification. 11.12, right. This is a program where we have to certify that we will abide by various nutritional requirements, and in return for signing things and saying so, we get some financial impact of some sort.
And historically, this board has adopted this particular regulation.
Motion to approve. Motion is made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Next item is the first reading of policy 3524, and this was a discussion at a policy meeting regarding hazardous materials in schools.
Yes. So this is a first reading, no vote tonight, but an opportunity for comments and questions or suggestions for changes. Jody, I see you have something highlighted there.
No, actually, I have a question about the maintenance, the cleaning supplies. Do we keep them in the elementary schools and Parkland and the high school? Do we keep them in a specific place that's locked up?
We have chemical sheets, and we have books and binders available for the public to inspect. Chemical hygiene officer?
She's right here.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Are you just at the high school, or do you also watch out for Clark Lane and the elementary?
Clark Lane as well. The elementary schools haven't had a problem to this point. If they did, I would go in. math plan that you're looking at is designated for instructional purposes, so it excludes janitorial supplies.
Any other questions or comments on this policy? So we'll bring it back to the next board meeting. Okay. Next item is the second reading of the policy. This was the 5145.5 sex discrimination and sexual harassment. This is a second reading, so we can vote on it tonight. Or if there are further questions, we can discuss it further.
I move that we accept this policy as written.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, if there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? And that's all that's on the agenda. Is there any other new business? If not, motion to do is in order.
Motion